This is the Environmental Protection Commission special meeting, Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. This special meeting has one item of business. It's old business. It's EPC 20-2024, PL 24-108, 104 Old Kings Highway North, 104 LLC, and Old Kings Highway North 108 LLC, to demolish existing structures and construct two new 3-story apartment buildings, parking, walkways, drainage, and other related features in and approximate to a water course. The property is lying along the west side of Old Kings Highway North, approximately 1,625 feet north of Brookside Road, and are identified as follows in the records held by the Darien tax assessor. 104 Old Kings Highway North, map number 35, lot number 17. The zone is DB, and it is approximately 0.2101 acres. And 108 Old Kings Highway North, map number 35, lot number 18. The zone is DB, and it's approximately 0.22 acres. This meeting is for discussion and deliberation only. When we take a formal vote, it will be in the January meeting, our regularly scheduled January meeting. Okay. First, before we start, I'd like to go around the room to make sure that every commissioner has attended all of the has attended all of the meetings relevant to this application. And if you have not, to say that you have viewed the videotape that's available on channel 79, right? And so Michael, I'll start with you.
I've been in attendance of all meetings, thank you.
Peter?
I've been personally at each and every meeting.
Okay. I missed the September meeting, and I watched it on video, but I've attended every other meeting since.
I also watched the September meeting, and I watched the December 4th meeting in its entirety, as well as November 6th, where we were out of town. I was here for the October 9th meeting. I'm not sure this was on the agenda, but I have seen it.
I've been here for all the meetings. I came in, was late to the last meeting, but I did watch that on TV 79.
Okay. Trevor, new member?
New member, last meeting, so December 4th was my first as a commissioner on this committee. I have watched one of the previous meetings specific to this property, and I was in attendance of last meeting.
Okay.
And I will catch up, but I don't think I can vote on this. Do I have to abstain from?
Yeah, I would suggest,
Yes.
as chairman, I would suggest you recuse yourself.
Yeah, that's what I will do.
Okay. So,
You got me.
Oh, how could I
Okay.
forget?
I have been in attendance of all meetings.
Great, thank you. Okay. What I'd like to do is to start the meeting. I'll start by requesting each, we're just gonna go around the room, initial impressions, what struck you, what struck you. Remember our charge as the Environmental Protection Commission is long-term and it's significant impact on the wetlands and water courses. So when we consider this application, that's our charge, is to consider the long-term impact on. So
what about flooding? Is flooding categorized into that or not?
yeah,
Flooding of the structure. Okay, so that's not wetlands, not the water course, it's flooding caused by. Is that part of our jurisdiction?
We are the flood and erosion control.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. When you're going to make a decision, you're making the decision in light of Section 10 of our regulations. There's criteria for decision. And that's what Eric was expressing. It has to do with environmental impact, viewing alternatives. It's you go right down the line that you weigh what was proposed relative to those criteria for decision. Really, the most important element is this commission initially made a determination that a public hearing was required for the consideration of the facts and circumstances of the application based on both public interest and significant impact. And with that is an extra finding that the commission must make about prudent and feasible alternatives, the availability of prudent and feasible alternatives. So with that in mind, I think it's probably important tonight that you're going through and expressing on the record your initial considerations, and we can even go down to specific elements that they addressed as part of their application process. And the end line, the goal here is to give me some direction in order to draft a resolution in advance of the January 8th meeting when a decision needs to be rendered. With that,
Bill, you wanna start us off?
All right. We heard testimony that it is not a FEMA flood zone. We heard testimony from a neighbor that has said areas get flooded. I have a problem with a 1 foot elevation rise from a stream bed to a facility, and actually maybe even less than, maybe actually it's a little less than that top of the stream bank. One section where people have to go in and out of that building. If it's not FEMA, well, maybe it should be. That stream bed is just too close for me. There's the building over there today is 3 feet above grade, the old building. You know, this one's gonna be at grade, or maybe a little bit higher, but it's basically the same height as the top of the stream bed. It's just a matter of time, and I just can't feel comfortable, stuff like that. So that's my biggest nut on this right now.
Michael?
Maybe other commissioners, go ahead of me, and then I'll come back.
Okay, so I wanted conceptually to like this as a project, but I think as I got into reviewing the plans, hearing the testimony, I had a few major issues. I'm still open in mind, but the first one was the fire marshal request to meet AAS HTO H22 weight loading parameters. So this was documented a number of times, specifically on the September 30th, 2024 memo from Fire Marshal Bobby Bush. Also, a December 4th, 2024 letter from Joe Canis indicating that this was an issue that should have been attended to. An October 9th, 2024 letter from Canis, and a December 3rd, 2024 email from Fire Marshal Bobby Bush. Nowhere did anyone say, including Fire Marshal Bobby Bush, load up a fire truck, put it on, and let's see how it works. We're looking for an engineer's report. An engineer's report is a report by a licensed structural engineer in the state of Connecticut. Presumably, he or she would be applying monitoring equipment, be looking at underneath, would be doing an inspection, be looking at whether there are any gaps. I found very compelling Joe Canis's testimony on the last day, mentioning the bridge in Greenwich that was all in operation until the end of a project, and then it was shifting and moving and the I-beams were all rotted. So a picture is not worth 1,000 words when the words that we're looking for is an engineer report. So I looked at this as frankly a little bit disrespectful to the committee, and I really felt that the fire marshal was asking for this report as well as our engineer, and it wasn't produced. So that was my first major issue here, so just put that on the table. The other issues that I've had on this are related to the relatively small ribbon around the water course. This is on landscape plan LP1, which in my opinion was really insufficient to remediate the disruption overall in the reduction in impervious spaces across the property. So I do see some significant impacts. I see a permanent loss of green space around the watercourse. I see this as being an integral part of a watershed area. That was demonstrated by the yellow piece on the last day, where we saw that this was in fact a watershed. I do understand that on Route 1 within the watershed, there are a number of developed properties, but this is still a watershed area. And also, the velocity of water that goes through this canal, I don't want to call it a canal, I'll call it a watercourse, is there's a lot of velocity. And I think the neighbor, Susie Wong at 100 Old Kings Highway North, was very compelling in her description of the velocity of the water that we saw, as well as the flooding that was occurring, especially in the area pertaining to the second lower half of Building A. So the significant impacts I see is a permanent loss of green space around the watercourse, an increase, a permanent increase in impervious surface to 65.2%, 26.7% related to the building, 30.9% related to parking, 7.6% related to sidewalk paths. And then on the corner of Building A, which is the part of the application I have the most concern with, the distance between the watercourse and the building is being reduced from 40.5 feet to 7.9 feet. And I think that, particularly given the velocity of the watercourse at that pinch point, was something that was not addressed in the application. I do note the cul-de-sacs, and I do note the schematics that were presented, but only one small little drain reaches into that corner of the property. The cul-de-sacs are designed, I think, to remediate sheet flow off the property. I'm not as concerned about the sheet flow off the property. I'm concerned about the impervious spaces as well as the foundation of the building that doesn't allow the flood area at this pinch point of the watercourse to properly drain. Especially effective, I thought, was the testimony by Susie Wong about the flooding that would be just short of one half of the building. So the significant impacts also include the lack of an ability to remove or store snow. I heard very clear the applicants say that they would remove snow by using a loader and a dump truck. And then in my mind, as I went through that, I started to ask, well, at what point is a loader and a dump truck going to come in? Is it going to come in at 6 inches? Maybe. Is it going to come in at 3 inches? 2 inches? I know probably most people don't, shovel too much if they got 1 or 2 inches. But what if you have 1 or 2 inches and you're going to have some icing? So the property is going to rely significantly on sand and salting. And sand and salting, in my opinion, particularly in the lower part of the property where the cul-de-sacs are not, is going to be directly affected with the watercourse area, including over the bridge. So it defies logic to me that someone's going to bring in a dumper and a backhoe or loader for 2 inches of snow. Maybe they would, but I don't. I think the snow issue is going to have a significant problem with the environment, particularly as it relates to sanding and salting. So that, I think, is going to cause siltation or sedimentation, which is clearly a significant impact as defined by the regulations. The snow removal is going to lead to more salting and sanding, much more than what we would typically see. There's no place for a simple plow to come in and plow it into a corner. That was the testimony I heard. So I see significant impacts on the environment. Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to go next, Mr. Chairman. Well, I appreciate Peter's comments there and the pointing out of the negatives that may be still unanswered. The meeting of December 4th, which I did listen to and watch thoroughly, for me, asked, answered, and re-answered a lot of the questions that I would have had going forward. And I think the positives of this application outweigh some of the important negatives that Peter points out. I completely agree that a structural engineer's evaluation is essential to complete the file, not just a truck and a picture, to use your phrase, 1,000 words. But today we're dealing with two rather old buildings that, in my view, there's some probability that there's hazardous materials in those two buildings, A. B, I think this, if approved, is gonna fulfill or deliver a needed type of housing for a segment of the population that can use it. It was clear from even the earlier meetings, but certainly the meeting of a couple of weeks ago, December 4, that the drainage on this site is being almost infinitely enhanced, because there's nothing there today to properly direct stormwater, and there is a robust stormwater management installation being engineered and proposed. It's kind of a challenge site to start out with. To me, I drive by it, and my years in working with a commercial real estate guy in New York City, this feels like a commercial site, yet a needed residential proposal is here on the table. And if I were to vote tonight, I would vote in favor of this project.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Well, I guess, to some degree, it's a little bit subjective, but one of the things that we've been charged with is, and the applicant's been charged with, whether there are feasible and prudent alternatives. And I guess the question in my mind is, is moving, I know that some changes were made to the planting plan, to adding additional underground detention units, but moving the buildings back 2 feet and not also reducing their size, is that a prudent and reasonable alternative? Or, should there really be consideration to other alternatives and how they affect the water course and everything that we looked at with this particular plan? Also, some of the issues in the tie and bond report from December 4th, I'm not sure that they were addressed. For example, plan revisions do not address what the surface condition of the utility trenches will be and the water course itself, and to prevent future scour and to restore the natural stream bed conditions. And also, it was suggested that if the culvert is replaced, that it comply with the Connecticut stream crossing guidelines, and I was wondering, how does that differ from the existing culvert? Also, it just seems that there are so many things that are dependent on the lessening the damage to the water course. There's so much that's dependent on it. For example, the drainage system has to be, the operations and maintenance, like everything, it's like every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed in order for everything to work just right. Right down to removing the garbage. For example, the garbage truck backing in, there has to not be someone parked in the one lone parking space at the end in order for them to be able to access the garbage cans. What if there's a delivery truck there at that time? It's just, it seems like everything has to be like running optimally, and I just don't know if that's realistic. Also, the stormwater management system was designed for the 50-year storm, and I know that we've talked about this before, but I mean, we do get more intense storms, and I'm not sure how, if we've adequately been walked through what the scenario would be if there is a storm that exceeds that intensity. The plantings, I'm relatively satisfied with. I think there certainly are a lot of plantings. Again, I just wonder, you know, if they're gonna be maintained in their optimal state in perpetuity. I know that there is a guarantee both for the plantings and for the maintenance of the water course that the non-native invasives be managed for up to 3 years, but after that, what happens? I'd like to see something put on the land record that it's managed in perpetuity. Let's see. I just think that, my biggest thing is just, I mean, we've talked about this with other projects. Is this the right project for this site? I guess that's just what I'd like to talk about.
Okay. Michael?
So, I think the first thing I'd like to say is, we ask a lot of difficult questions to applicants, and I think, as a commissioner myself, is if I can ask these difficult questions and the answers that are responded are adequate or truly revelational. For example, we had an engineer in talking about a pretty mundane project, and we were able to glean quite a bit of information as it might relate to other future projects or projects that we've approved in the past. And you, as a commissioner, you feel comfortable with your decision-making because you've asked that tough question, you've gotten the answer, and maybe you've been able to compare it to something else that we've approved or denied or conditioned in the past. So I think it's important for the applicant to know that, at least I'll speak for myself as a commissioner, that I'll ask the tough questions and get straight answers, and then I feel comfortable in my decision-making to approve or to decline an application. And then the second piece is I always look for an opportunity to condition an application such that this commission can correct a flaw in the application. And it's also on a personal level, it's difficult to say no to my fellow residents. Like I know the applicant is a longtime resident of Darien. He's done a lot of great work in town. I do agree with Jim's comments. I do feel that there's a place for all different types of affordable housing. But coming to the semantics of this application, it feels as if we're banging a square peg through a round hole. And if I was to vote on this application right now, it would be a no vote. And I do believe that there are prudent alternative options. I do believe that there are significant impacts to the water course. And I'll address some other information that wasn't already previously mentioned, so I'm not redundant. I first want to start off, and I think it's relative for everybody's understanding, that I was disappointed with the professionals and the consultants representing the tenant, or representing the applicant. The first piece was, there are many professionals that were repetitive in stating that there would be no adverse impact to the water course when it was not their profession to say so. For example, we had the architect make a representation that based on the activities of the site, that there would be no impact to the watercourse. He is not a soil scientist. We had the engineer make a similar report to the watercourse. He is not a soil scientist. The applicant had the opportunity to bring the soil scientist to the commission to provide testimony. It's not our responsibility to be information gatherers, meaning we're not collecting, it's not our job to collect or to investigate the application. It's the job of the applicant and for staff to encourage the applicant to bring the right information to the table for us to make decisions. And I felt that the consultants that were brought to the table were very asymmetric in the information they were providing and the questions they were answering. And I think fundamentally, we had very basic questions. For example, you are proposing to put a corner of a building approximately 7.2 feet from the watercourse. Well, a neighbor has testified, and we appreciate the neighbor coming out. I think the neighbor is fairly ignorant to the impact of the watercourse to her property. She represented that FEMA, we are a flood and erosion control board, and that FEMA had contributed to the repair of her dwelling after she received flooding inside of her first level floor of her house. That's significant. That's a significant impact. We made mention to the consultants that the abutting neighbor has marked wetland on her property, but that wasn't a concern to the applicant where the Site A building would be located. And I think going back to my point on a very fundamental level, that would just be common sense. That's common sense real estate development is this something that's sustainable? Would there be an impact? And I think absolutely there would be an impact. The engineering was conducted in the middle of the summer when potentially the site was most dry. We asked the question is where was the perk testing completed? And again, reinforcing my thought process on a significant impact to the watercourse was that the data wasn't where if I wanted my best shot at having a successful development, I would perk test along the watercourse. Why was that not completed? Because I think common sense dictates that would be a suboptimal data that would encourage a person not to put a foot in there. Again, the architect gave anecdotal, unlicensed testimony saying that per another project on Long Island Sound, he could dig 20 feet abutting an ocean or a large body of water and not find water. Yes, anecdotally that can happen, but that's not this application and that's not that consultant to provide that testimony. When it came to the attorney provided testimony where initially he wanted to make clear that the watercourse was not a wetland. It is a watercourse. He also wanted to play down the fact that the watercourse was in fact on the property. And if you can go back to testimony, we went flag for flag where the watercourse either abutted or was on the property, and the watercourse is materially on the property. Second, the attorney and the engineer provided testimony where the watercourse was more often dry and did not have water in it, and in their opinion never flooded. This all contradicts what we know to be true and what the neighbor has testified. So all of these are, you can just say, anecdotes to how we view this site, and parlay that with is there an adverse or significant impact of the watercourse, and I believe that is true. Going back to engineering, we're talking about sheet flow, how one would remove, how the site would operate, and I think this flows into a whole nother segment of why I think there's an impact. And I also think it also plays into the planting plan as well. I do not think that the planting plan part of our charge is to make sure that there's an enhancement to the site. I think the planting plan is eyewash. I do not believe that I don't believe that there's been testimony, even from the landscape architect, and especially based on the questions I asked the landscape architect, I disagree with him wholeheartedly. I don't think that the planting beds I don't think the landscape area is maintainable. I don't think that it would have a significant outcome. If I was a homeowner, not a commercial developer, and I think there's an asymmetric, I think a developer is gonna say, hey, look, we'll get what we can get developed and see how long it lasts. And as long as I get my permit approved, I can build this thing, we'll do what we gotta do, and then when it dies, it's a commercial site. It is what it is, and that's not what we want. I think if you have 7 to 15 feet of buffer with a fence in between and a walkway, a 30-foot story building looming over the plantings, where there are proposed deciduous trees that would grow 60 feet in the air, potentially 60 feet wide, with a root mass that would be equal to the drip line of the tree. We're talking about a very small area for that to thrive, and I think that common man would agree with that assessment. And I think it's very obvious when you're on the site. When you look at a plan, it's very easy to just I think it's very easy for 7 feet on a plan to look like 20 or 30 feet. 7 feet is, in my opinion, ridiculous. And I think it's more ridiculous that the alternative to the location of the buildings was to move it 2 feet further away from the water course. I think it's concerning that the total Coltech count on the project is up in the high 70s. I don't believe that the treatment train is there. If you want to compare Thorndale Circle, there was a massive and thoughtful stormwater mitigation plan where the water was treated. It had geography to span and to be absorbed into the ground and then flow into a materially large, we'll call it a rain garden, where the water could infiltrate slowly and there would be high water quality. We have a linear what is it? It's late.
Spreader?
Yes, the level spreader. We have a linear level spreader, even closer to the water course, with known flooding. That's not reassuring that the water course would not be significantly impacted when that auxiliary system were to overflow. And there is not a material distance from that level spreader to the water course for that water to be treated before it gets into the water course. We can talk about the structural design. The architect provided testimony about the economic feasibility of the site and how the only prudent alternative would be to build an even bigger singular building on the site. I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous. I think a reasonable, prudent alternative would obviously, and we know that's not what the applicant desires, would be to enjoy the existing dwellings as they are, would be to build a smaller building or smaller buildings more in line with the setbacks of the property. There's a reason why, I believe there's a reason why the applicant has decided to go with an age-focused development is such that the tenant could apply for an application to have the building at a near zero setback. And I don't think that this site is capable of handling this type of development. And a significant decision process for me is that there is a residential neighbor abutting the property. And there are people that are going to live in these abodes in the future after the applicant is, say the applicant sells the building, moves to Florida, or the applicant immediately sells the property. This property requires a significant amount of maintenance just based on its design. And let's just talk about its design. The design of the emergency egress on the back of the building is equal to the height of the water course. And a buffer needs to be built between the two to mitigate, and I believe that was testimony from the applicant's engineer and maybe the architect. So my understanding is that there's some type of pony wall or retaining wall or berm of grade and a walk to have to have distance between the water course and that emergency egress in the back. Speaking about that it's very tight in the back. So I think there would be, again, another significant impact to the water course based on just any mechanical operations that need to be done on the backs of the buildings or the sides or the fronts of the building. And this is common knowledge, for every 10 feet of height to put a ladder on a building, you need to kick the ladder off 4 feet. So on a 30-foot tall building, you would need to at least have the ladder close to 10 feet off the back of the building. And the applicant's also speaking to, which is hearsay, because that's not testimony provided from the fire marshal, is now the planting plans need to be modified in the field after an approval, so he can be happy with where firemen might potentially ingress into the building. That sounds from this is a very static process. We have a thoughtful development, we approve the plan, and everything falls in line after that. There's just been a lot of changes, and it feels like that the consultants are like, oh, you just tell us where's the pain point with the commission, and we'll come up with an answer to solve that. Let's condition it, or just approve my application, and we can move on. And that causes great alarm to me as far as how the site is going to be managed in the future, knowing that a material amount of the site is abutted by the water course. And not to mention that there is not a material improvement in the reduction of the impervious surface area of the project. The vast majority of the site, let's not be confused, the vast majority of the site is impervious. And then we can go back to, how is the site developed? The applicant has testified, through the consultants have testified that anecdotally, it sounds like there's 12 inches of wiggle room with the total width of the site to locate everything the way they need it. And that just seems, and that's assuming that there's already encroachment in the existing buffer, the existing setback, and there really is no margin for error on locating everything, let alone successfully maintaining it. And I'm not gonna be repetitive about snow removal or sheet flow, but anybody that does common sense commercial landscaping would know that unless like a town body official is policing all the activities there, all of that parking lot is gonna sheet flow into the water course. I mean, again, I'm not an engineer, I am not an expert, but we all have our skill sets, we all have common sense, we all approve applications, we review applications, and we've seen enough examples of where this specific site would in fact have a significant impact on the water course, just with everything in the parking lot sheet flowing into the water course. And we see that from the abutting sites. I mean, when I was there visiting the site, there's garbage in it. And with tenants living in the building, there's gonna be more garbage in it. So what is a prudent and feasible alternative for pollution in the water course? Having more buffer between the water course and the buildings. This is just very elementary. And the applicant is correct. This is an exercise on economics. So I want the applicant to have something, but this is not the right plan. And I think staff has been very kind to the applicant to provide them guidance on what would be prudent and feasible alternatives, what the commission would like to see, And this is what the applicant is insisting on us approving. So for many of these reasons, this is why I would vote no. And I think I could go on and on and on, but I think I've cited enough examples, and I'll leave one other example. I think this is also like a very salient point for myself, is the soil scientists provided a report to delineate the edge of the water course. And I would argue that further away from the edge of the water course, if we had peer review of the soil scientists, that I think that the water course would extend farther from the edge of the water course. It would be further into the site. I believe that to be the case. The applicant chose not to bring the soil scientist to testify. I would say the soil scientist is one of the more important consultants that has been before this commission many times with the applicant's attorney, and that would have been an invaluable resource for us to ask questions and get answers. And I'll also say that I thought there was a decorum where documents were provided to the commission where the commissioners could review them. And this is going back to staff helping to manage the application process. Is that soil scientist report was submitted 2 days, I mean, you're counting hours. That soil scientist report was submitted 2 days before the actual hearing. And I don't think that was particularly productive to wait to the last minute to submit that information. And you can read that how you choose. But that just goes back to the credibility of the applicants and whether I believe that this site can be significantly managed this site could be managed to not have a significant impact on the water course. And I'm sorry, I'm being tangential, and I'll leave you with this, is another piece was with the landscape architect, we're talking about we're talking about how successful the planting plan will be over time. And the landscape architect was saying on the record that the town property was adequate for a deciduous tree to grow on the front of the building. That's the town property. We know Ed Gentile would say, I don't want the planting plan to encroach the property. I don't want you counting on a pin oak root system growing into my property because my snow plows are gonna dump salt on the right of way. They're gonna plow up the curb. And I mean, we don't have curbs in town so that the plows don't damage the town right of way. Or the plows don't get damaged on the curbs, or the plows don't tear up the curbs. So it's just another point of, the thoughtfulness of the plan and whether the regulated activities will be successful over the life of the structure. So again, to reiterate my sentiment on the project, if I had to vote today, I would vote no.
Thank you. Okay. I guess it's my turn. Obviously, this was a complex application, with a lot of bends and twists. I'll point out, I pointed it out at the beginning of the last meeting about the bridge replacement. Peter had the documentation as to who said what to whom when. It was never received, and for me, to the potential replacement crossing the culvert is, if they had a definitive answer, okay, the answer they initially gave us was a photo of a fire truck. Sorry, but in this internet age, I'm sure there was a fire truck on top of that. However, I can be skeptical too, okay, and say, was it there or not? I don't know, okay? But that's not what we asked for, okay? We asked for an engineering report. It was repeated by Bobby Bush, the fire marshal in town, okay? Not happening. They did not have it. They had, from my mind, sufficient time to respond to the request and chose not to, okay? Not that they didn't get to it. They said it was too expensive, okay? Okay, I accept that from the applicant, but I have to make my own mind as to how I perceive that, okay? and then that was because to replace that bridge could possibly create a very significant long-term impact to the wetland and the water course, okay? I don't know if it did, I don't know if it doesn't, but I don't feel confident giving an okay, saying it did. That was the first one. The second thing was, the setback from 40 feet to 7.9, I think Peter said. So that for me, I don't know if I could live with that or not, and I still have to go through that. What I found a little disingenuous is, for 3 inches of snow, for low impact snow, backing up a truck, okay, now, backing up a truck, getting the front loader, dump it in and taking it away. That may work the first storm, we have no way to enforce that, okay? People, over time, typically take the easiest way home, okay? And the easiest way home is just to plow it right out into the water course. Now, what people will do is they'll put salt, sand, etc., etc. That's gonna go right into the water course. And it will, given that happens, every planting that you have around that water course is gonna be sanded and salted. The landscaping will not survive that, in my opinion, okay? That's just pure common sense, okay? Okay, that was in its own, okay. I agree with Michael on the soil scientist. I would have liked to have heard that person speak specifically. Perk tests, perk tests, I'm a big perk test person, as everybody knows on this commission. I have been for the last 12 years that I've been on this commission. I usually ask for perk tests, and they didn't provide it next to the water course. And I thought it was very funny, because I was gonna come back to the gentleman and go, hey, well, listen, I can give you a number of applications where you're next to a river course, and guess what? The common sense is that the level of the river is typically where the perk test gives results. So, I mean, it's sort of like he picks the one case in 1,000 that doesn't work, or that it doesn't work, in order to negate the 999. The other thing I'll say about this application, and I'm gonna go forward on this, Rick, because it's sort of, okay, the last date to receive information for this application was what date? We met, what, December?
4th.
What, was the 24th?
We met
Fourth.
December 4th.
Was December 4th, that was the meeting, that was the date of the meeting. What date should we have received all the information?
15 days prior.
15 days, whatever that date is, okay? There was a large amount of information that was not received on time. This application's been open since September, okay? That they document dumped us, okay, at the last minute, expecting us, that they were fully aware of it. They know that they expect us, as volunteers in this town, to be able to assimilate multiple pages of technical information within 2 hours or 3 hours of the meeting. That's just not acceptable, okay? And if I'm gonna go back and say, go forward on further applications now, to sit there and say, if that happens again, I will cut the applicant off right there and say, I'm not considering anything that you've submitted, okay, after the 15 days, or, after the 15 days prior, okay, because that's the way that's the way the process works, okay? Not only as chairman, but as a member of this commission, I need time to sit down and digest, okay? I'm not sitting on my computer, oh, they just dumped something, oh, they just dumped another thing. I don't get pings on my telephone telling me, oh, they just dumped another, 3 pages of documents on here. No, and so that for me, I thought was a little disingenuous, okay? I normally give people benefit of the doubt on stuff like this. I don't know. I'll just leave it for each commission member to make their own decision as to that. Okay, the plantings that they have suggested there are, I don't know if they'll survive. I don't know if in the long run that they would survive there, given the little distance between there, between the edge of the building and the water course. Also because this, and so once the plantings and edgings are not good in the long run, that affects the long run viability of the wetlands and water courses. That said, okay, and I'll go to Jim's point now. These are two dilapidated buildings. I would be very happy to see something happen there. Okay, there was the application before this, 130 West Avenue, which was a completely dilapidated house, and I'm very happy to see somebody, a developer, go in, see this house, see the possibility, develop it, and did an excellent job. This piece of property needs help, okay, and is ripe for development. It's right next to, and there can be something there. It's just not. It's just that this application has many elements that affect the long-term wetlands and water courses. So that's my opinion. Would anybody else like to vote anything?
No, I'm happy with what I heard.
Michael?
No, thank you.
No further.
I have nothing to add, but I've been enlightened by my fellow commissioners' comments. I listened carefully to all of them. And it makes me pause and think a little bit. And I think I'd also like to congratulate maybe you, Eric. This session, to me, points out the care that this commission as a whole brings to the good of this town and the thorough vetting of the applications that come before us. I don't know that we do this on I don't recall doing this each and every application we ever see, but this is a complicated one. There are lots of open questions, as has been made clear, and I just think, as a commission, you're doing a heck of a job.
Well, I think it's
Stay on.
also, Eric's done a great job, I agree. There's a saying, you're only as good as your last trade.
I know that's it.
And
You shouldn't say that on a day like today.
And we have to drive around town and look at these applications that we've approved. And I think it's important for everybody to understand, many applicants have come before the commissions, had approvals, had their engineers say, this works. And the sewer commission has a meeting and say, oh, what about that god darn manhole covers popping on site A where the stormwater detention system isn't working? And that engineer for that applicant said it was foolproof, it was gonna do the job. But the town has to live with it for the next 20, 30 years of the economic life of the building, because there's nothing we can do about it. And we're driving around looking at sites and projects that we've approved, and we need to be prudent for the applicant, for the people living in the building, and for the neighbors, and the town. I mean, we have a lot of customers that we're representing.
Well, I have, excuse me, Joan.
Sure.
Cornacha, which is probably one of the legal cases. Cornacha versus the town of Darien Trevor. Reading,
Okay,
good reading.
I'll take it on the plane with me next week.
Says that we must rely on expert testimony. Okay, one of the things that, because I agree with you, Michael, one of the things I have to ask myself is, do we as a commission and me as a commissioner, do enough time asking the hard questions, putting these experts here and testing their application of their expertise, because of the case of the blown like, so, you know, and there's a number of cases here. Okay, I can pick out where surveyors have done, you go, wait a minute, that's wrong. So, going forward, I think I take a classmate and say, wait a minute, okay, what you're telling me is this, how do I know that? Can you demonstrate that? And I think we as a commission have to be particularly vigilant when we hear an expert, and the expert goes, oh, there's nothing wrong here, this is okay. Just okay. Now answer these few questions for me. And so, I think I take that away.
Well, here's a very, as it relates to this application, the architect, I still don't understand. I mean, I know the reason why, but I don't understand why the condition exists, and the outcome of this condition is still a potential impact to the water course. The building is 3 stories tall, and you typically enter a building with all the applications we see finished first floor. The staircase has to be the first group of steps, 2 or 3 steps from the emergency egress of the back of the building is 14 to 17 inches below the first floor elevation.
Right.
Because there's a limit of 30 feet for the height of the building. And so they're engineering the building to fit the economic outcome. And that might not be the right design for the site. So I would bet that the architect doesn't want that condition, but he needs 3 floors on the building.
Yep.
Well, he said he also would have to bring in a lot of fill, if he
It's-
raised the height of the building.
It's layers of the onion, right? When you want to
If you
have.
can't do this, then you have to bring it filled, but then he has to ask
But then he
for a release on the height.
Right,
So that's not, I don't think that's gonna happen, so
And
I think PNC's gonna give him that, that's my.
And I think there's been several examples of those to shoehorn in the building or the site that we're seeing. And I also am skeptical of the percentage of impervious area.
Mm. You think it's greater than 65%?
I do believe that, and I guess we didn't, again, going to Eric's point, we didn't have time to ask Ty and Bond to corroborate that. But I would, and the applicant's attorney has done a really good job of coming to the commission with surveys, colored sections of the surveys, to give the applicants an understanding of the impervious coverage area of the site. We did not see that for this application. There's a reason for that. But just staying on point here is I think there's just been several examples of where there's been a imperfection in the design of the site where the consultants have over-explained why it had to be that way. And I believe that if they had the opportunity, which they've also said, they would do it in a more traditional means.
Well, didn't it all start with the amount of parking that they determined could be on the site? I think the architect even said that it was the parking that was the tail wagging the dog. You know,
Because
that
they needed-
they
yes.
determined how much parking they could put on it, and that determined the number of units.
That was why they went with senior housing, right?
Because it was
typically
18
in
spots
CRE,
instead of
you would
4.
need a higher parking ratio.
Yeah.
If you're
If
gonna
it
do
wasn't.
senior, you only need,
1.5.
1.5.
Yeah.
And, being the rookie on the commission and, this being my first experience, this was great. I've driven out to this property, I think 3 times now, while it's been raining, on my way back from, PT. One
Or
from
blank type or
yeah.
something.
The imperviousness of the site, if you go out there now, it's all junky, blacktop. Like, it's more impervious now than it ever will be, moving forward. While that old blacktop may count as impervious, it's not. So when you put new stuff there and you have these big new roofs, all of that water is gonna be, coming down, and I think, affecting Miss Wong. And really, I mean, they're trying to fit a ton onto a teeny site, and I get the financial aspect of it. It's my career, I look at these things all day long. And to your point, I would love for something nicer and newer to be built here. I just don't know how you make it work.
The planting plan is not an enhancement to the water course.
And there, yeah, and the other thing about the planting plan, I mean, I understand that he, you know, like, you know that I usually insist on like true natives, and, you know, he fudged that a little because he was saying, well, they need to be smaller, so they brought in, you know, hydrangeas and other ornamentals, and yeah, I mean, you know, there were so many plantings that it sort of diluted it, but I mean, he said it was like under 10% that there were non-natives, but I agree with what you said about how they most likely will not survive because of all the shading and the growth of the pin oaks, and what Peter said, you know, about all the, you know, there's gonna be salt and sand that's put on the parking lot, and it's gonna, you know, go over that. And the other thing is I feel that there was a lot of reference to the fact that this was a man-made watercourse, and I feel like maybe I'm just, maybe that's just me who felt this way, but I kind of got the sense that the way it was said that they felt that it wasn't like important, but because they said it was just for the conveyance of primarily for the conveyance of stormwater. And, you know, they said that there hadn't been any observable aquatic life, but there had never been, and to your point, there had never been the proper expert to say that there wasn't aquatic life there. But the bottom line is that this watercourse does go into Dunlop Lake, which I think it was one of the during the last hearing, it was testified that this then meets up with the Tokenique Brook and goes into Scotts Cove. So this is a very important watercourse. I mean, I don't think it can really be understated, and I felt that it was understated a little bit, but when you think about where it leads to and the impact that it can have more generally, it's
I think that's a terrific point. I mean, it's not only all water is connected, right? And a conveyance, even if it is a conveyance, I'm not
Yes.
even sure it's a conveyance. I think it's more integral to that whole watershed area that was
right.
testified to.
But that's how they
it's-
referred to it
It
multiple
was
times.
diminishing it,
Yeah.
which I think was a lack of appreciation that, no, this is a watercourse that is part of a watershed that's moving into an important lake that is connected and so on. And any, you know, siltation or saltation of that will have down and stream effects.
Yes.
And I think that's a great point, Carolyn.
I don't know whether this is so Rick, I think actions speak louder than words, and the current condition of the site is that the applicant is stockpiling construction material on the embankment of the watercourse. So if maintenance of the site is so integral, are we already getting off to a bad start? So that's just a data point as to my decision-making of if I recently purchased a site for future development and it was within my control to improve my site starting on day one, which was as easy as not having cardboard boxes falling apart with drainage components and PVC pipes just laying there and old temporary service electric panels and construction material thrown on the embankment, I might not be as cynical of the maintenance aspect or other enhancements to the site. I mean, our mission is to enhance the watercourse, and Rick and I would say, can you please send a letter to the applicant to instruct them to clean up the buffer from the watercourse? I think that should be an official town letter, just to help them understand our mission and how to maintain a site.
I think the attorney in his closing was saying the place would be cleaned up and reference the tire, but kind of say, well, who owns the tire now?
And just for a matter of enforcement, this guy's a developer, he's probably gonna develop the site, sell it, plow his money into another project. how do we enforce that the actual investor or group that buys this property adheres to the planting plan, and obviously that upkeep will be on the card, but the plow plan, like, if I was buying this, I would say,
Only
plow it
when
in the
you,
back, or
only
plow it
when
in
you
the
need
front.
to come to us to ask for something else.
Got it,
Okay,
okay.
so the
So
answer is-
once it's,
once it's on the land card, okay, once it's on the land records, okay, it remains because it's written,
okay,
okay? The issue, and my issue with the snowplow is, if I had to go through the economics, I would say, hey,
Nobody's gonna do that.
$1,200 to,
nobody's
to,
gonna
to,
do that.
to, you know, to get a truck and a front, you know, like this, and you go, never happening. To cart that stuff off-site, no.
And let's keep in mind that this is gonna be plus 55 housing, so what, you're gonna need to salt that stuff for,
Mhm.
Yeah,
you know,
and so
over
they're gonna push
water,
it,
yeah.
they're gonna plow it, and it defies, you know, in my mind, it defies credence. You know,
Yeah, it's not-
it's just not credible that they're gonna go
I
and
mean, if it's rock
pull it
salt,
up and take it away.
I mean, rock salt is caustic to the water course, but it's gonna be, it'll be,
More
what is-
caustic to the plants.
Yeah, oh, yes, but it'll be, Rick, help me out, chloride, what's it called? Hydroxic chloride or
Calcium chloride?
calcium
Calcium
chloride?
chloride, but potassium
Or
chloride.
potassium chloride. So on the labels of that material, which will be used on the site, which all commercial guys use.
And is that better or worse
No,
than?
no, it's worse, it's
Worse.
very caustic. On the bag, and this is all for a little courtesy to my fellow commissioners come this winter. On the bags, it says do not put on hard concrete or stone paver
Yeah,
surfaces,
yeah.
because it'll just completely erode it where it just flakes, it'll flake a concrete slab into pieces.
Wow.
So
Or like
now-
bluestone, it crushes bluestone,
Yeah,
yeah.
it crushes everything. So now, and that's what I'm speaking to of all the sheet flow and the impact on the water course, is you're gonna have all the hardscape just erode and wash, all that
Yeah,
cement will
Right,
just wash into the water course. And then on top of the chemical, then you'll have the chemical in the water course.
All right.
So anyways, another data.
But if you didn't have to pack the site that tight, a
You'd have more
plowing plan
buffer.
there could be a little more feasible.
You'd have more buffer.
there would be a place to stockpile the snow.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? Anyway, is there anybody else who'd like to talk about this? Okay, so we're finished, I think. Rick, you know, direct you to write something up for our consideration next meeting. There's no approval of minutes, there's no issue approvals, there's no other business. Mr. Millar?
Question before we move to that. So we're asking Rick to draft a conditional letter of approval?
No.
No, what is he writing up?
Okay, he's writing up, in my mind, because as I counted them here, okay, you were in favor, but then when you heard everybody, you're weighing in.
Yeah, you should have picked me last.
Should we make a motion?
No, I'm not voting. We're gonna vote. We don't have
Not
any,
till January.
we're not going, what do we, I don't know what I'm.
No, I understand.
I'm voting on.
I guess Jim asked a good question, which is what are we writing up?
Are we asking them to consider prudent and reasonable alternatives? No.
Hearing's closed.
Very close. We're not gonna reopen it.
We asked for that
Twice.
twice.
So, they could have come in a number of times. They've talked to Jeremy a number of times, I understand. They've talked to Rick a number of times, I understand. And Jeremy and Rick have given them advice. You can do this, you can't do that, you know, it's sort of, in my mind, I have no idea what he paid for it. But he bought the piece of property, and now to make it work financially for him,
Yeah,
he has to do
X, Y, and Z.
X, well, you know, it's sort of like, well, I'm sorry if you overpaid. You know, you should have done you should have run the numbers beforehand, not try to squeeze something in there just to, because you, under the pressure, maybe he had, you know, he had to up his bid to buy the property. I don't know, I'm speculating, but it's not my problem.
Yeah, that's,
You know, you sit there and say, just, you know, it's he bought a piece of property with a water course on it. What he wants to do with this document is, in my personal opinion, substantially deteriorate the water course. Okay, and has long-term effect. And so,
And far-reaching.
and so in my mind, okay, for one of the first times ever, from this commission, we don't negotiate. This is, I'm stopped, okay, at this point in time. I go there and say, hey, we deny the application. Okay, that's my opinion, that I would direct Rick to deny the application, and we go, and we have reasons of significant impacts to the wetlands and water course, and with that denial, they have all sorts of alternatives that they can consider. So, that's.
So if I may,
Yep,
procedurally, we are asking Rick to write up that denial
yep,
for,
because, yes,
for voting either way on January 8th, you said, January 8th, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm just on discussion and deliberation, which I think is the stage you're in. I would definitely, my personal opinion is I would agree with that, based upon what I've heard and the reasons I expressed anyway. And, I think there's definitely for me the significant environmental impact, but I also would say the lack of the engineering report is a critical deficiency of the application on its face, and with respect to the bridge.
Here's, when Wilder came in, Wilder says, oh, we're willing to put a provision in there that says, if we need to replace the bridge, which we don't think it does, but if we do, we'll come back and apply.
Right.
So, at that point, I cut him off and I said, no, wait a minute, you're boxing me in, because
I saw the whole conversation.
you've dumped hundreds of thousands of dollars in there, okay, and now I'm not gonna approve it? Yeah, that would float over like a lead balloon.
Sequence was wrong.
Okay, so I was like, no. And then during the hearing, Wilder came back. Well, how about if we, do this, and how about if we do that, because he knew that was, I'll call it a fatal flaw in the application. And to me, I'm not gonna be, as a commission, and as a commissioner myself, I don't wanna be handcuffed into saying, well, it has to be replaced, well, it's only this, it's only that. No, I wanna see the application in its entirety, okay, with all the questions answered. And he had his chance. We asked for it in September, and he had 2 months to respond, okay? He had 2 months to respond, and his first answer was, it was too expensive to do. Well, now it's real expensive to do, okay, because it was sort of like, if you had listened to the commission, if you had listened to Joe Counis, if you had listened to the fire marshal, there was a message there, okay? And they chose not to listen. That's their personal choice, okay? And they made a decision not to respond to that, okay? I'm making a decision, my personal decision is to say, hey, I need that to decide, and for that reason, it's a denial, okay? Because I don't wanna see this application come back in 3 months, with him already dug in the ground doing what.
Well, didn't he say they wouldn't begin construction
No.
until?
No, the problem is, we needed to close the public hearing on that night. And, because of the the time set. And so it was sort of like, no, and we, as a commission, okay, decided, well, that his last gasp for air was, I can get it to you in 2 weeks. Keep the public hearing open for 2 weeks, okay? I asked the commission,
And we had already closed it at
okay,
that point.
if there was a motion to reopen the public hearing, there was dead silence, okay? There was dead silence. So, public hearing's closed, we can't accept any more information, okay? And so, they can do with this what they want, okay? But it's their fault for not responding on that specific point. okay, of bridge replacement.
But you know, we certainly, you stated exactly as it happened, but even if it were reopened in some way, that the board voted to do that, we still need the engineer, the peer engineer, to have
Review it.
time to review it. And that wouldn't have been there, because we would have just opened it to receive it, but we wouldn't have opened it to review it, have a discourse, have the engineer come in front of us. There's a reason we have timing on all this, and it relates to the 15 days. So, I don't see, you know, the commission's decision to not open the hearing as being, you know, a critical flaw. Here I see the lack of providing this report timely so that we have a due diligence, maybe even interview the engineer, have our peer review engineer review it, understand the process, and to deliberate and to hear that kind of evidence. But that wasn't presented to us. So I think again, that's a critical flaw in the application.
So anyway, you know, that's, so that explains my position anyway, so, but I'm one person here. So that's the reason I will vote for denial, okay? Among other, there are a series of other reasons, okay? But that, to me, is the big one, okay? Is that because if we have to replace that bridge, that opens up a whole issue of affecting this water course. Of affecting this water course in the long run.
And the budget, and their budget.
Yeah.
Not that that's not our thing, but we have a document from the fire marshal stating that, that the bridge must be signed off by an engineer prior to the issuance of any permit, so, I mean, that's sort of like ties our hands right there, I feel.
So that's the reason that, because it's he
doesn't say it's okay to make it a condition, he says it should.
he didn't listen, okay? He didn't listen, or I could take a more negative view, okay? You know, that says, maybe he didn't want it, okay? Maybe it was like, you know, these guys, you know, I can get away with this, I can get away with a photo. I'm sure you saw the photo, right?
I did.
No.
I did.
And I'm sort of like, come on, you know, that's not an engineering report, and so,
Well, yeah, but I think it bears clarification, is the consultant from Ty and Bond specifically cited an example as to a picture of a large truck on a culvert doesn't prove that the culvert is safe to
Right.
operate on.
Right.
And if we're talking about putting seniors, which I think is a great idea, and for the record, I'm agnostic as to whether or not it's Section 8 housing. I'm agnostic to any form of
But it's
low-income
not,
housing.
it wasn't.
I'm agnostic to any legal use of the property.
Mhm.
Our body is the water course.
Right.
And we're looking for a disturbance to the water course vis-a-vis an inadequate culvert or bridge. And Ty and Bond had cited an example where there was a bridge that was failing and crumbling into the water course, and because engineers happened to be nearby, they identified a problem that was going to be an issue for that entity with their activities at the time.
2 questions, if I may.
Mhm.
One of Carolyn.
Mhm.
Was it stated by the fire marshal that an engineering sign-off was
Yes.
required?
In his December 4th email
Okay,
from the fire marshal to Rick.
I'm sure I heard that, but I'm just forgetting it. That's
Mhm.
my first
Yeah.
question. So an engineering report is a requirement under any condition now?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
exactly.
So number 2 question is, just so, at the end of the December 4 meeting, Rick, procedurally, you said, okay, today's December 4, and we need to maybe have this working session, but there was a period of time within which this commission had to respond to the applicant. Could you just remind us what that is again?
Now, when you have a public hearing, you have to hold a public hearing within 65 days. You try to have the full public hearing held in one session. From the closure of a public hearing, you have 35 days. But there's abilities to provide extensions.
Right,
The
okay.
the total being not more than 65 days, and basically you can use it as either designated for you or in any way you can.
65 or 35?
65 days. So he asked for, we had acceptance in August, initial session September, they asked for a deferral, they granted extensions, they asked for a deferral in November, that was October, November. We ran out of time, and they ran out of time.
They ran it.
So their option was to provide the information or to withdraw the application, and they chose not to do that. They chose to file information, not in a timely fashion. I mean, we've shown that, and maybe inappropriately so, that willing to give them every opportunity to explain their application. Everybody bent over backwards for it. Joe Canis bent over backwards for it. Mr. Canavan did, the environmental consultant bent over backwards and did things in the last day. We had the fire marshal provide information, referral comments. I can tell you guys have to spend a ton of time and energy looking through that material, and I'm sending you things. I have to tell you, I got burned out from it because I was looking at these things, days, nights, weekends, to try to get an assemblage of information that you guys could work with.
Right.
And so there was a time constraint. And we have to, it was closed on December 4th, we have to decide within 35 days, which happens to be like January
8th.
8th or 9th, it's like right there.
And what is the risk to this town and this commission if it doesn't happen in those 35 days?
There's no automatic approval under the wetlands regulations.
Thank you.
They have the opportunity, if we didn't act, is let it sit there forever and ever and ever, to go to
Right.
the state of Connecticut and have them render a decision.
They can go to deep.
Okay.
They can go to deep and ask deep to do this. And
Okay.
Rick, what's your experience? Have you ever heard anything going to deep?
I never heard of, and not in my experience,
So we
but
could-
anything I ever worked on, went to deep.
Yep, but we don't need to go there.
No, you have the administrative requirements that
Right.
are outlined in the state, and you're expected to follow them.
Yeah,
You know,
and we have followed it, and I agree with you, Rick, I think we've given every opportunity here, including, sitting for, what is it, close to 5 hours past midnight, in a hearing to hear every single piece of opportunity and evidence for them to present to us. So I think there's been more than enough that we've done.
And there's a letter or an email or correspondence from a town official, fire marshal in particular, that says, before we go forward on this, I need, or we all need, a structural engineer
one of the
report that
things
that
that-
bridge is sound.
One of the things that's very important when you
It
look
meets
at.
a certain Connecticut state requirement.
Right.
H20, something, I forget what
Well,
it
it's
is.
not,
Right.
it's the ASHTO requirements. Be able to support a
And that,
vehicle over X thousand pounds.
and that report, as of tonight, does not exist in our
Correct.
file.
Right, but the thing that's
Doesn't
important
exist.
when
It's simple as that.
we solicited,
Not complicated.
information, so the commission had every right to solicit after that first hearing. Again, that's why we put everything in writing. Very detailed list of information they needed to move forward. That was September 9th, or September 12th. Was not provided October, not November. In the interim, we have our expert, we all in some way are experts based on our experiences, but we have a true engineering expert that we hire that said an assessment of the stability of the bridge and capable of withstanding the forces is important to the commission because, one, it's a safety issue. Two, it was expressed by the fire marshal that he needed it for safety issues. And it was needed by this commission to establish what the full, part of it has to go with the completeness of the application and completeness of the material you received. You hit it on the head during your testimony, during the testimony. It was an incomplete portion of the application. But we had experts in their fields. Joe Canis, at least on 2 occasions, requested the information. Bob Bush did, requested the information, commission requested the information. It really is a void in their application that they did not. We need that information to assess the feasibility of their development, to just get a handle on what the full range of the impacts are gonna be, the full amount of encroachment's gonna be, and to evaluate potential remedies or protections that you could implement if it were a part of the application. You know, it's a brand-new bridge, let's call it a bridge, it's really a culvert, but a brand-new stream crossing generally has to meet, from a practicality standpoint, the state stream crossing requirements, which may completely change the dynamics of this application, change the dynamics of flooding, change the dynamics of the drainage plan, how you intend to do your water handling plan, the amount of linear feet of water course that's affected. Do we have to change grades that, you know, to a greater extent? It was pertinent information. I mean, I think that also applies in some way to the alternative test. We asked twice, if not more times, a meaningful test of the alternatives. And I think what we ended up getting was a de minimis kind of moving things a couple feet here and there.
Yeah.
But I think some of that testimony by their team was more a justification as to why their proposal was inefficient, that was used an awful lot, an efficient development proposal, and it's a justification of the building that was proposed as opposed to, as you said in your testimony, Peter, was, you know, we really have to focus on, is there something here that we can do to adequately ensure the protection of the water course in the regulated areas? So it was kind of a disjointed kind of response. I mean, there was arguments there that, oh, it's not significant, so why are we, and I think the quote was, why are you even asking for that information, because it's really kind of useless information. Pretty, in my opinion, pretty clear that and the commission found this at the beginning, you find the significant impact at the very beginning. You know, we're doing multiple crossings with utility lines, potentially a substantial redevelopment of a vehicular crossing, a significant diminishment of the buffer from 40+ feet to 7 feet or so. There was a pretty hefty increase in imperviousness as a result of the development. There, you know, and all those things lead to the possibility of significant impact. The only reason why things are properly, that maybe fall into the realm of the realm of approvability, is because of all these things that they did to impact certain things. A planting plan, you do an extensive drainage plan, you're doing all these things to try to make it acceptable. And I think that, I mean, I have to say, you guys did a wonderful job in the review of this thing, because you hit the highlights. I have to show you my notes compared to what you said this evening and what you said during your things, because they were right on target, I think, is that things such as, there's such an encroachment here that even if you accepted the principle that the planting was sufficient and you did all these other great things, that there's not enough room around the buildings to do basic maintenance without an encroachment, which would lead to any benefit you got from doing your planting would be gone in a matter of a year or two, and then therefore you have a long-term impact. Or the planting was there for stability of the slope, then you're gonna have erosion. Or the planting was there to filter runoff. It's no longer filtering runoff. And I think that we also went through this whole thing about how practical is some of these elements here. I mean, we did, back in September, a laundry list of items just from a pure planning perspective, and you know, you get criticized for, well, that doesn't fall within your purview. But things that, such as the snow removal, is so obvious to me that you need to have a place on site in a distant location that is gonna allow you to do basic snow removal and provide, you know, a reasonable, safe, place to live. And when they pushed things so close to the property boundaries to get their 2 feet, they eliminated all that space that you could possibly use. I think, again, reasonable people without, you know, having a preconceived notion of what's gonna happen, but is that it's gonna get plowed, it's gonna get plowed to the lowest point, it's gonna be filled with sand, salt, debris, it's gonna be plowed to the edge of the water course. You have a pollution load, you're gonna compact the soils, you're gonna kill the plants, and therefore, everything that you have done to try to make this project, you know, suitable for development is gone. So you have, you know, again, you have to look at it long-term. I think you did an outstanding job focusing on what the issues were here, and,
I think just another quick, just very simple point is the applicant originally stated they were going to put the utility in the culvert and later removed it to say that the utilities were then going to pass through the water course. And
Well, the electricity was gonna go in the culvert.
so my concern again was another disturbance to the water course.
what you were going to originally have the sanitary sewer replaced, you had a water service, and then you had a water service for, and still have a water service for fire suppression.
Right.
The utilities initially were gonna go on the bridge, and Joe Canis brought up about cover over that utility, over the bridge, which kind of led to this whole discussion about the integrity of the bridge and the ability to not only support trucks and whatever else and traffic, but also about being able to provide electric service. And so what they did was they moved it, you know, overhead, and they're gonna trench and get it to the back. I mean, those are other things, is, you know, basic planning principles. You don't want all your, you want front-facing buildings, you don't want all your utility meters facing the street. You know, you don't want your transformers sitting facing the street. Just the basic things that maybe you don't think about, but, you know, they would, now with the overhead utility, which
Well, we have
ultimately caused problems with, now you have impacts,
that's
now you have
another-
impacts with the trees.
Correct, because the Eversource is gonna come by and tomahawk chop the tree.
So you have a
Right.
60-foot high,
Utility.
you know, the selection of trees may not be the most outstanding. If you have a pinnock that grows 60 feet, now you have overhead wires. You know, we did a lot in Stanford about treescapes, and had this treescape manual, and you had to select trees based on things like, you know, the usual things like, you know, the environmental conditions, but one of the big things was overhead wires. You never
The height,
chose the
right.
tree that grew 60 feet, you had overhead wires. You had to do it like dogwoods, which grow 12 feet. And so, or that's why you see a lot of, in the downtowns, some of the, you know, some of the other trees, skate trees, I can't remember at this point. But-
Gotcha.
Hornbeams.
Horn beams, and there's just other ones that don't grow as high, and you don't have to kind of swap out of the middle of it 2 years down the road, because you have to, you know, the utility company comes by and says, this is unacceptable. So, again, I think you're right on point on a ton of this stuff, and
All right. I think we've had a lot of deliberations. Listen, I want to thank the commission very much for putting as much effort in as they did, because this took hours and hours and hours of everybody's personal time. Taking today, because of the holiday period, oh man, you know, I'm sure everybody's schedule is you know, we were lucky to be able to get everybody together for this. Anyway, thank you very much. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to make a motion to adjourn this special meeting of the Environmental Protection Commission of December 18th, 2024.
Second that motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're off the air, gentlemen.
Thank you.